have a good amount of people in here, so we'll go ahead. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. This is actually our first forum in our series, so we are very, very excited about that. This forum is for you guys. We want you to feel comfortable to ask any and all questions that you might have at any point. So there is a raise your hand button located in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. When you raise your hand, I will be able to go ahead and unmute you to go ahead and ask whatever question you might have. If you don't feel comfortable unmuting yourself to speak, or if you would just rather not, there's also a chat function that you can use as well to ask questions, and we will be monitoring those throughout this forum as well. So on that note, I would now like to turn it over to Brenda McClellan. Brenda, thanks for being here with us.
Good morning. Thank you, Molly. Hi, everyone. I am Brenda McClellan, Director of Investor Engagement at Traverse Connect, and I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Justin Winslow. Justin became the president and CEO of the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association of 2015, after serving 4 years as the vice president of government affairs of the association. Justin is responsible for expanding the scope of the association through incorporation of both the statewide lodging association and the Detroit Restaurant Association into MRLA. He also led a statewide coalition that successfully defended the industry against several damaging ballot proposals during his tenure as CEO. As vice president, he was rated the second most effective association lobbyist in Lansing by Michigan's independent source of news and information. In 2015, Justin received the Rising Leader Award from the Michigan Society of Association Executives, and he received a Bachelor of Arts degree from the James Madison College at Michigan State University and holds a Master of Public Policy and Administration degree from the same school. Go Green. Justin resides in the greater Lansing area with his wife, Stephanie, and his 3 children, Avery, Grayson, and Alex. Thank you so much for being with us today, Justin.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And you may hear any one of those 3 children at any point during this video, so I'll just apologize in advance. No, I appreciate that, and it's good to see Trevor Tkach, who sits on our board of directors, on this call as well. Trevor and I have been working quite a bit in what we thought was going to be the big issue of the early part of the year, restoring Pure Michigan funding. That felt like a heavy lift in a battle at the time, and that we now yearn for those simpler times just 2 months ago now for what it's been like sort of day in and day out. So I'm here to answer as many questions as you guys have of what's happened, what's happening now, and what comes next. And I'll give maybe a 10-minute summary or less of what the association is focused on, because it's been all hands on deck to try to make the case for the industry at the federal level, where more stimulus funding, ways to infuse this industry, restaurant and hotel, with cash during an impossible time that we can. So that's taken up a considerable amount of time. At the state level, it's to some degree that same thing, but right now it's a huge focus on what reopening looks like, when, for whom, and what are going to be the new rules of the game once that works. And then at the local level, talking about Traverse City, and we've had some conversations with some of our members in the area and talking about things at the local level of what we can do to help increase, once restaurants are able to open up more, what are some of the things we can do to expand their footprint into, well, patio space. Some people are talking into the streets, let's say Front Street, and maybe even into parking areas as just a way to generate business. So this is something for us that we've been trying to navigate at all 3 levels. At the federal level, I'll just talk briefly. You know, everyone hears about PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. It's critical. It's an innovative program that is that many people in this industry have applied for, restaurants and hotels both. It is a lifeline, but it is uniquely challenging as it relates to this industry. And you can see what's happening as to why right now, right today, there's large sums of money and there's an opportunity for forgiveness of those loans if you can meet certain parameters, right? So if you can bring back, or if you can have 75% of your payroll covered, you're going to get at least that percentage back, which restaurants love to hear the idea of not having to return the loan, as do hotels. But the timeframes for this industry specifically do not work at all. And it's evidenced by the fact that they have an 8-week window that they are forced to bring people back. And that window has to start no later than next week. Well, restaurants aren't open. Hotels, and we don't know if May 28th, which is the current day, and we'll get to that, is going to be the date that they're going to be allowed to open either. And hotels are operating at 10%, maybe even less in Traverse City right now. So the idea that they are able to put a staff to use to bring them back in any capacity and have them be valuable to the business is almost an impossible challenge. So you're either, if you're a restaurateur or a hotelier, you're in the prospect of either assuming it's just going to be a loan. You're going to take this money in and assume you're just taking a loan that you have to pay back in 2 years. 2 years in which, by the way, you don't anticipate your restaurant or hotel generating normal levels of business, which is a challenge in and of itself. Or if you're going to try to bring back your staff, how's that going to work? You're not open. Maybe you're doing okay with carryout. Probably not. Even if you are succeeding, even if you're thriving at carryout, you're maybe at 50% of what your revenues look like before. And that's not a recipe for success. Plus, it's not a recipe for bringing back a large portion of your workforce. So you're in this almost impossible position of what to do and how to deal with your work staff, where you see a lot of them are likely going to be making this decision where they're going to bring people back for 8 weeks. Some will be paid to do very little or nothing. And then in 8 weeks, we may be seeing this industry, hotel and restaurant both, be jettisoning a large portion of those employees again, simply because there's no need and an ability to make that payroll, either because we're forcibly not open, or we're allowed open and the general public is not yet confident in large numbers to come back out, to take that weekend trip up to Traverse City, or to go out to any one of the great restaurants that exist in Traverse City. And that's the rub. That's the challenge. So we've been spending an awful lot of time working with the members of the Michigan Congressional Delegation. Jack Bergman gets this issue. He understands it. He's one person who happens to be in the minority in the U.S. House of Representatives. So we're also trying to spend a lot of our time working with the U.S. Treasury so they can tweak the rules. They have a lot of flexibility on how they're going to choose to implement this program, and we're seeking as much flexibility and forbearance for this industry, which on both sides, restaurant and hotel, that have been harder hit than any other industries out there right now. And when you put a massive program out there that's supposed to help infuse and sustain businesses through an impossible time, you need to make that a little more tenable and usable and functional for the industries that are feeling that pain the most right now. And so we spent a lot of time at the federal level convincing our elected leaders and really trying to push on the U.S. Treasury to the extent we can to loosen those rules. So that gives you a sense of where we're at on the federal level. We know that there's a new federal stimulus package being worked on right now. We are hopeful in that for a couple of things. One, a $240 billion pot of money, a grant program, is essentially being requested. Almost I think of it as emergency grants that would be doled out specifically to this industry to shore up all of the shortcomings, to make payroll, to make rent payments, to keep you vibrant, open, and alive through this down period. That's a heavy lift. It's not going to be easy, but it is something we are going to be pursuing heavily. On the hotel side, the big ask, we call it the CMBS, right? There's a lot of debt financing that make hotels and a hotel expansion possible. If they don't have greater access to more liquidity, to more capital in the short term, the number of defaults in that industry will be catastrophic. Hotels will shutter in large numbers. And so really pushing on more leniency in what they call this Main Street lending program, run through Treasury and run through the Fed, as a way to make sure this industry can make its debt payments in the short term and get through this impossible time for them as well. So that sort of shores up where we've been and where we're going federally. At the state level, it's all on reopening. And yesterday was, I won't use curse words. I promised I won't. But yesterday was a challenge in Lansing, from protesters in large numbers with open carry assault rifles all around the Capitol, making everyone feel, frankly, quite nervous, to a legislature that tried to obtain a greater level of authority, tried to be a larger part of what this crisis looks like in Lansing right now, and playing a bigger role, because they don't, at least the Republicans in both the House and the Senate, just do not feel like the governor is balancing the needs of business owners, the needs of being able to open up an economy so the cure isn't worse than the disease, with balancing the safety of the citizens of the state. And those are tense conversations, and there are people with strong opinions on both sides of that issue. And frankly, it's not as easy as a black and white, it's all one or all the other. And those are the types of situations that led to what happened yesterday. The legislature tried to assume power. They did not give the governor the extension that she was looking for under a 1976 act that basically allows her 30-day windows for emergency orders, or a state of emergency, in which case the legislature needs to be engaged afterwards. So that period has ended. The legislature then tried to obtain a series of these powers and dictate when open dates could happen for a variety of the industry. And they were able to get that through the House and get that through the Senate, but they were not able to get immediate effect. And that's sort of a technical way of saying they may have passed that bill, but it does not take effect until this legislature ends. And that is not until the end of this law would not become effective until April of next year, which is absolutely irrelevant to the situation we find ourselves in the immediate future. So the governor followed suit by putting out 3 new executive orders, one after the other, basically switching the authority of which she has to make all of these executive orders from one law or one piece of enabling legislation into another. Now we're basing this on a 1945 law that really does not have a time limit to the governor's authority to lead during times of emergency. And then she essentially reinstated through May 28th her ability to have that level of control. Many of the orders that were in place stayed in place under the pre-existing timelines that they were brought in. So I know that 60-some, we're almost at 70 executive orders. I can't wrap my head around 70 executive orders in 4 months this year, but those all will continue to exist now in the same timelines that they were existing on before. So whenever they were set to expire under the previous version, under the previous authorizing legislation, is the same date that they would be now, with the exception of those in the public accommodations, restaurants, bars. The dining options are still now banned until May 28th at the earliest. And the level of anxiety and frustration that this has caused our members is maddening to them right now. They need more certainty. They're closing in large numbers. The numbers that we have put out, that 2% of restaurants have already closed permanently in the state of Michigan. That's over 400. That's 400 restaurants that just aren't coming back. And we expect that number to reach around 1,000 by the end of May. There just isn't enough cash flow. And for those who didn't receive federal stimulus dollars, there's not enough there to keep them going through this time period. And so there's that kind of anxiety. We know that 55% of restaurants right now aren't open at all. And not necessarily permanently, but are closed to try to wait out this period because they don't think they can be profitable doing carry out only by what their business model looks like. So when we saw this extension to May 28th, and that May 28th date not necessarily being a concrete plan of what reopening restaurants looks like, the level of frustration and anxiety within our members this morning is high. I think my phone has dinged on silent or about 17 attempted calls just since we started this conversation to give you a sense of what it's like for them. And so we're we're in an interesting period because we've been very participatory in the process with this administration. We've been involved and been leading the work groups on what they call the MERC, Michigan's Economic Recovery Council, which is the governor's set committee to try to provide recommendations how and when to reopen the economy. So we've led the restaurant group, we've led the hotel group with input, frankly, from hotels up in this area as well, and restaurants as well. But that process isn't moving in a clear and decisive manner. And the level of anxiety, the level of closures that are coming are kind of forcing the hand of this association to kind of push forward, not wait to see what guidance looks like anymore from the governor, but to really put forth a plan that we think is going to be necessary to stave off the outright implosion of the restaurant industry and the hotel industry as well. I mean, listen, everyone's talking restaurants right now. 85% of hotels may be open, but they are struggling to a degree that is not sustainable for the long term at all. And to the degree that impacts Traverse City's economy, it's not lost on me on what's necessary. So some of the state solutions, and this gets into the local level, and then I promise I will shut up and start taking some questions. At the local level, we talked about this. What does that mean? What can we do? We're leading a work group in the Liquor Control Commission to speed up these sort of patio permits to allow restaurants to spill out into larger areas, because we know when they are reopening, they're going to reopen at a smaller capacity with social distancing at 50%, and I sure hope not less than 50% occupancy. And so when they do this, you need a greater square footage just to have a chance to make a profit on this side of the equation. So we've been working, Pam Marsh has been really helpful with us, who owns Red Ginger, on trying to make that message clear locally in Traverse City. Is there a way to transition Front Street a little bit and make that more tenable to retail for the summer months in ways that you might not be accustomed to, but we're not really accustomed to any of this that's going on right now. And if we want to see these restaurants survive, if we want our hotels survive, we're going to need to be creative in solutions we can come up with to make things a little easier for them to succeed, and while encouraging the public that the steps being taken to ensure their safety are substantive enough that they can feel safe going to a hotel for the weekend up in Traverse City for a wine getaway. They can feel comfortable going out to Red Ginger for a great night out and a great experience. And that's a lot of what we're trying to focus our effort on. Is we know we need to get them open, and as challenging as the new regulations are going to be, as hard as this uncertain timeline is, we know the biggest challenge for all the operators, hotel and restaurant alike, is going to be to convince the public that the efforts, the steps that we are taking right now are going to be enough that they feel safe, because until they do, you're just not going to see the numbers that are going to be sustainable for the industry right now, the greater hospitality industry. So that's a lot of information in a condensed period of time. I'll stop for a while and take as many questions as you guys might have.
Thanks, Justin. That was really helpful and extremely informative. I just want to remind anyone, if you do have questions, if you hover over the participants button and pop up that participant list, there is a raise your hand button located in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, which will allow me to unmute you so you can ask your questions live. If you don't feel comfortable with that, there is also a chat feature as well. So please ask any and all questions that you might have. I don't see any at this time, but I'm going to give people just a minute or so to get those in if they have any.
Molly, there is one, or Justin, there is one question from Nicholas. He said, thank you for the update. Despite all the challenges, what bright spots do you see in your in your sector right now? What's still working well?
Yeah, I do get this question, and I've been doing a lot of media, and it gets real dark. And I don't mean for it to be, but some of the numbers that we share are alarming. And so people want to hear what are the bright spots. I'll say there are a couple. I mean, one, the communal spirit of this industry shines through right now. it happens. You know that people who run restaurants and hotels are community leaders, that they're engaged in part of not just hospitality, which brings a smile to people's face, but they're part of their community. But the degree to which I've seen people who can't operate in a profitable way right now switch to be as effective as they can to help provide food for frontline workers, to help feed those who are underprivileged in their own community as a way just to help see them through it's been really inspiring. And I'm a frankly somewhat sarcastic, occasionally cynical person, and I've been sort of overwhelmed with positivity when I see the types of efforts that are being done day in and day out. And some of them get covered, but many of them aren't looking for the spotlight or a press release. They do it because they think they know that it's their community, it's their home. And we see that everywhere, Traverse City included in that as well. But on the more practical side of the equation, what do I see? I see people trying new things in this industry that they aren't accustomed to or didn't think that were a good idea before. Independent restaurants trying out new delivery that they never really thought was worthwhile before. Trying out different carryout options, trying new menu things that make it work, trying retail grocery and putting together these sort of family style meals with all of the ingredients, plus all of the fruits and vegetables your family might need for a week. Are really kind of creative ways that people are meeting demand in different ways. And I think it's important because it's sort of inspirational in the short term, but this industry is going to change, and this is going to be part of the reality in a much bigger way going forward. People are getting accustomed to this. People like that they can swing by and get some curbside pickup from any restaurant that they choose now that maybe didn't really find it worth their time before, that they can get delivery to their house from a variety of these places that they couldn't find before. So the amount of creativity on how they're meeting this need is positive, because you're going to see that be a much bigger part of this industry going forward. And on the hotel side, all these guys who are making their space available, and maybe this is more in the acute need areas in Southeast Michigan, but hotels have been making their space available to healthcare workers and people who are working on the front lines who can't necessarily go home for a period of time while they're in the middle of this, and reallocating that space to fill that need has been pretty cool as well.
Perfect. We did have another question come in. Does the governor understand that most restaurants need a minimum of 2 weeks to bring back staff and restock? When can we find out for sure when we will open?
Excellent question. I was at an hour-long conversation yesterday with Jeff Donofrio, who's the Director of Labor and Economic Opportunity for the state. And he's also the person that the governor puts up for all the press conferences when they have to talk about unemployment, which isn't going as well as they'd like. So he has to field all those questions. So if you've been watching him, you've seen Jeff frequently take those slings and arrows. But he comes from restaurants. He has restaurants in his blood. His family comes from him, so he gets it. And we talked for a long time that we need this level of certainty, because to exactly that point, I've been using the term 2.5 weeks lead time. So if May 28th is really going to be the go, then we better get that clarity that is a for sure date within the next week and a half or so we can start building up towards that date. Because we hear from Gordon Food Service, from Cisco, that they have supply chain issues in their own right, and trying to reallocate those resources back to the restaurants that are going to need them is going to take time. So Constance, I'm with you. I hear you. You are 100% right. And we're spending a lot of our time talking about just that kind of logistic issue.
Perfect. I don't see any other questions coming in right now. Although, Justin, I did want to ask, what are some of the most common questions that you're getting right now? I mean, what are some of the big things that people are asking you that you're seeing daily come in?
Yeah, well, you're here seeing some of these. When are we going to reopen? Why can't I reopen? Can we reopen now? What would happen if I actually did reopen? Do you think someone would actually come shut me down? There's a lot of that right now, because there's the anxiety to try to get back open. At the very beginning, anyone who has received one of these PPP loans is in the ballpark of they're all sort of realizing it in their own time that it's not working for them. So how can we make that work for them a little bit better? Because they're very concerned that they will have taken on new debt that they thought they were going to have forgiven, but because of the unique challenges of the industry, they might not. And that terrifies them because they're in a bad place now. Assuming more debt and having to repay that within 2 years makes them even more nervous, frankly. I hear cocktail to go. Why can't I if I'm going to get tacos from my local taqueria, why can't I also get a margarita to go as well with that? It's an excellent question. Many states, literally including all of them that surround us, are doing some version of that right now. The chairman of Liquor Control Commission in Michigan is steadfastly opposed. We've been trying to be respectful of his wishes because we have a lot of asks as they relate to the Liquor Control Commission. But there's a growing push and need, not just from our sector, but everyone's saying this is a reasonable amendment, if not during just the crisis time. We'd love to see it permanently. But at least during this crisis shutdown period, why can we not move in this direction? So we get that question a lot. We're making progress on that end. And I feel like the governor's office actually is in agreement and wants to push something out sooner than later on that front. So that may be fun on the consumer side, and certainly as a help for those restaurateurs with a liquor license trying to do anything to make some profits right now.
Perfect. I don't see any additional questions coming in at this time, and I do want to be respectful of your time as well. It looks like we did just get one more. Are there serious talks about opening up the state based on the 8 regions? For example, the UP or Northern Michigan has a reduction in restrictions and keep the Metro Detroit area with more strict measures.
Yeah, so there is a lot of serious talk about that. That is sort of the crux of the House Republican plan. So Speaker Lee Chatfield from Levering, very near the top of the Lower Peninsula, sees that acutely and realizes that the reality in his community is not the same as the city of Detroit right now. And can we open some of the economy up right now? There is some interest, but also more pushback than interest from the administration right now of considering regions. But I say that in that she has been somewhat of a makeshift approach of what reopening looks like. It seems to be on the fly, and she will use the term nimble. And I'll try to at least give her the credit on that side of the equation. She wants to be able to respond quickly when she sees the signs that are there in the data. This would be using the words of the administration that suggest that that's a safe thing to do. And a lot of the data would suggest that one could open up Northern Michigan, certainly the UP, well in advance of May 28th. But she's coming up with these things sort of in an ad hoc or impromptu version. We saw construction was added to the list the other day, and it was sort of unexpected and out of the blue. So it wasn't a set timeline, which we're all looking for. Can we get a stable and set, and this would go to Constance's question, right? Can we get a reliable timeline that we can work from instead of and go? And because no business can really function well that way. So I'd say there's a possibility, but she's not there yet, right? In terms of a regional approach. And she's definitely not in the mindset right now to do the legislature a favor after how yesterday went down.
I do have another question that came in. This one says, our businesses want to open, but our local community isn't as supportive because we are in a remote area that has had very little impact with the COVID virus, and they don't want it to spread here. Do you have any tips or suggestions for dealing with this type of community that's a little bit more, against it happening because they don't want it to spread?
Yeah, no, that's the catch-22 of an economy in an area of the state that's really reliant on travel and tourism of the area, but travel and tourism might bring a higher risk. It's an unavoidable challenge. The angle we're taking, and I don't have a silver bullet here. The angle we are taking from the restaurant hotel side is you need to give the public the option and the opportunity, once they know that the steps we're taking to provide safe environments for them, whether it's providing PPE for all staff, whether it's checking temperatures and doing health screening of employees before every shift, and certainly sending anyone home that demonstrates any symptoms, whether it's social distancing and keeping separate, in terms of tables and guests, all of the types of things that we are talking about to make sure that they can come into a safe environment are all the things we can lead at. And then we need to give them the freedom and the opportunity to decide for themselves whether they feel comfortable or not. You know what I mean? There's no magical situation that works for everyone here. We can just take all the steps possible to provide a safe place, to prevent any kind of transmission in our places. But we're not in a position forevermore to stay shut down, at which point the cure really would be worse than the situation we're dealing with right now. So it's trying to find that right balance. And I'm sorry I don't have, Christy, a better answer that makes all of this work, but that's what we lead with.
Thanks, Justin. I do want to be respectful of your time because I know, as you mentioned earlier, you were extremely busy, especially with everything that just happened last night and this morning. So I guess when we end, is there one thing that you can leave this group with, words of encouragement, one piece of advice, anything you can give them?
Well, this is the hospitality industry is a resilient industry. It's not necessarily the most cash infused industry at the moment, but it is resilient and filled with people who are entrepreneurs who see opportunity more than they see risk. And that is a challenge for them right now, but they're going to find opportunities. There will be a chance and there's going to be a need. You know, there's pent up demand. And the second that people start feeling more safe and they know that they can go out, there's going to be a sustained, brighter future. And that pent up demand that's been held inside for a couple months, once that day comes, we're going to be back, and we're going to be back big. It's too big a part of who we are as people, not to be a big part of what tomorrow looks like. Just tomorrow might be a little longer away than it seems right now.
Well, Justin, we want to thank you again so much for your time, all of your insight, everything that you had to offer. We're extremely grateful for your time. And if anyone does have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to anyone from the Travelers Connect team. We'd be more than happy to get those questions over to Justin and help in whatever way that we possibly can.
Absolutely.
So thank you again. I hope everyone has a great day, a wonderful weekend, and stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Justin.